Redshirt log for 5/16/2016. So I'm gonna talk about Godzilla. This news came out a couple of days ago, but I wanted to wait a couple of days. I'll explain why in a second. Before I talk about the actual Godzilla news, I want to just kind of give my feelings on the American Godzilla movie that came out like 2 years ago. I think I did do a review, but it wasn't on Geekvolution. It's over on my other channel. And it's been 2 years. My opinion could have changed. It didn't really, but it could have. I like the American Godzilla that we did a couple of years ago. I don't think it's a great movie. It's kind of a middle-of-the-road Godzilla movie, but it is legitimately a Godzilla movie, which, you know, you can't really say for the '98 film. It's not the best thing ever. It's not GMK. But, you know, I'd put it somewhere in probably in the middle of my Godzilla list, maybe on the higher end of the middle list, or of the middle of the list, but I like it. It did things. I think there were mistakes made. I think that movie sold itself as a much more serious and darker film than it was, and I feel like it was almost made like it was a more serious and darker film than it was. You know, my biggest complaint is they keep not showing Godzilla and the monsters fighting, and then when you get to the end, like, that needed to just be Godzilla and the monsters fighting, and they still just kept cutting away from the good bits. There's some really cool stuff in that final fight, but it's not long enough or big enough for me. And I think it would have worked. I think the idea of ratcheting up your anticipation of seeing those monsters fight could have worked if the final fight was really, really good. But so there's been two kind of things that have happened recently with the sequel to Godzilla, which right now is creatively titled Godzilla 2. I don't know if anybody's reported on any of the news about this movie, so I guess I can say, I mean, this is going back like a year now, but early reports for Godzilla 2 have said that it will feature Monster Island and have Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan. So it'll be a bigger thing than the first film, and it will have classic Godzilla monsters reimagined, which is cool. I always like seeing new designs of the classic monsters, and it gives them less wiggle room to mess it up. Like, I wasn't really impressed with the Mutos. They were bugs, which didn't leave them a lot design-wise. I really like their eyes, but they kind of felt like Black Cloverfield monsters. And I feel like that's just kind of what we've been doing with our monsters lately. We just kind of do Cloverfield, and we just make them black or white. Even Pacific Rim, as much as I love Pacific Rim, there's a lot of, like, glowing green, but the monsters are all just white, and that's just boring. So, with monsters that already have predominant colors that are not black or white, I'm hoping, you know, I'm hoping Ghidorah is gold and not, like, gray. But so that's really old news. If you've been following this movie at all, you already know that. So the two big things that have happened in the past maybe week or two is the Godzilla sequel has been pushed back. I think it's 8 months technically, but it's pushing it back from 2018 to 2019. I think this is a mistake. Godzilla was kind of a surprise hit when it came out. Like, it wasn't the biggest movie of that year, but Godzilla did a lot better than people were expecting it to. And with something like that, I feel like you want to hit while the iron's hot. You don't want to wait a bunch of years. Godzilla 2 should be coming out next year. These are my own personal, like, head math. Or this year. Like, I think 2 years in between is a reasonable wait time, but it was going to be coming out in 2018, and now it's coming out in 2019. you know, that killed 300 2. That killed Sin City 2. If 300 2, which I still haven't seen, I have no interest. But if 302 had come out a year or 2 years after 300, I bet you that movie would have done better. Same thing with Sin City. If Sin City had come out in 2005, if Sin City 2, the exact same movie that they put out, that everyone kind of hated, except for me, because, you know, I love Frank Miller. I think if they put out Sin City 2 in 2005, people still might not have liked it, but it would have done better in theaters. I think pushing Godzilla back this far is a mistake. I mean, that's like 5 years in between. I think Godzilla came out 2014. Yeah, because every list says 2014 Godzilla. Yeah, from 2014 to 2019, that's 5 years in between the Godzilla movies. I don't think the general public's attention is held that long. I wouldn't be surprised if when they put it out, if people thought it was another, like, reboot. It's just, that's way too long. Any momentum that film had, that first film had, you're killing it. You're killing that momentum. And you're not doing anything to keep that momentum going. We don't have like a Godzilla animated series. Like, even the 1998 film had an animated series, and that was way better than the movie was. But if there was a sequel to the 98 Godzilla film, there was at least an animated series that was like keeping that version of Godzilla in the public consciousness. There's nothing here doing that. And Godzilla's not a huge property in America. It's something that, like, people know, but I don't think most people would actually watch Godzilla movies. Like, Godzilla Resurgence is coming out later this year. It's not going to do well here. Like, the masses, you know, Japan made this big deal about how, like, Japan is very spiteful. You know, they gave us Godzilla, and we did Godzilla 1998, and they were like, oh, well, you did it really badly. We have to fix this. You know, we can't let people think that this is what Godzilla is. And so they rushed out Godzilla 2000, which launched the Millennium line of Godzilla films, which was a line that was just kind of constantly ending. Like, the last, like, 4 movies in the Millennium series were all supposed to be the last Godzilla movie of the Millennium series. It was like Toei didn't want to make the movies. I don't even want to say, like, the filmmakers didn't want to make the movies, because there's some good Godzilla movies in there. GMK, chief among them. But Toei didn't really want to make those movies. Toei had ended Godzilla. Toei had intended to take a break from Godzilla after Godzilla vs. Destroya. And then we put out a movie, and they were like, oh, well, crap, they did this really bad job. We have to make a good Godzilla movie. And they made an okay Godzilla movie. I think 2000's probably about on the level of the American Godzilla. Like, I mean, if you want like a parameter, you know, I think the Godzilla movie we made is okay. I think it's around probably Godzilla 2000. But maybe circling around Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. You know, around that territory. It's okay. So then we put out our big budget, you know, we're doing a better job this time Godzilla movie, which, as I've said, I think is an okay movie. It's actually really interesting. Currently, Geekvolution is divided on the opinions of this film. Steve does not like this film. Manos hates it. I'm not talking about Resurgence, I'm talking about the American one. Steve doesn't like the film, Manos hates it, Rasco loves it. I don't know about Cap and Low. I'd imagine they're probably somewhere in the middle. And I'm kind of in the middle, but I'm probably more towards Rasco's side. I like that movie. As a Godzilla fan, I think it's a run-of-the-mill Godzilla movie, which maybe the best I could ask for. But so anyways, they're putting out Godzilla Resurgence. In response to us making an okay Godzilla movie, where they're like, oh, America thinks that's Godzilla, we're gonna make a real Godzilla movie. We're gonna show them. We're like there was an actual quote where, like, they said, we're going to show the world what Godzilla should be, what it really is. We're gonna make the best Godzilla movie ever made. Which, you know, props on them, but at least here in America, I don't know about the rest of the world, that movie's not gonna do that well. And if we release it theatrically, I wouldn't be surprised if people got confused and thought it was the sequel to Godzilla. So I think pushing the I think the release date they had was too far away. Like Drop Dead, that movie should be out next year. And pushing it back to 2019, I think is even crazier. I think Pacific Rim 2 is going to have the same problem. Like, Pacific Rim just barely eked by doing well enough to get a sequel, and I think waiting so long to put out the sequel is probably going to hurt it. Well, it'll do one of two things. Either it'll hurt it, or more people will have found and loved Pacific Rim by the time Pacific Rim 2 comes out, and it will do really well. I'm not sure which is going to happen. I assume it'll be like Hellboy 2, where, like, it did alright. Once again, not necessarily enough to warrant a sequel. But, so, I think the release date's ridiculous. And then, not only that, but there was at least going to be a gap between Godzilla 2 and Godzilla vs. King Kong, which, Legendary's decided that they're doing a big crossover movie universe, I guess? There's this whole thing with Skull Island. Skull Island has had one of the weirdest production histories. Like, it's not even the movie it started as, and at one point Legendary was going to make it, but now I don't think Legendary's even making it. I don't think Skull Island is connected to Godzilla vs. King Kong at this point. It was at one point. I don't think it is anymore. That's a weird production. Anyways, God, I'm rambling. This is already 11 minutes. Okay, so I think it's a mistake that they're not even giving some breathing room between Godzilla 2 and Godzilla vs. King Kong. Because as it is now, we're going to have 5 years without Godzilla. Well, I guess 4 years without Godzilla. 5 years between the films. And then we got Godzilla 2, and then the very next year is Godzilla vs. King Kong. That's a mistake. I'm telling you right now, like, unless Godzilla 2 is amazing, or not even, it doesn't even have to be amazing. It could be like Jurassic World. We're like, it's alright. But everyone loved it, and everyone saw it. If it does Jurassic World numbers, or has that kind of reception where, like, just out of nowhere, everyone decided to go see this movie, it's going to be a smart choice, I guess, to the very next year have a follow-up film. But I don't see this movie doing that. I don't see Godzilla 2 being, like, the Jurassic World of its year. In fact, so much time will have passed between the first one and the second one, I think it'll once again count as a surprise hit film, if it does that well. So, I think the scheduling's really off with all of that. I think that's a huge mistake. I mean, it's anytime anybody plans a movie past 2020 at this point, it sounds ridiculous. But if I was in charge of scheduling, if we have to push Godzilla back, I'd push King Kong versus Godzilla. Or I'd push. I don't know if it's King Kong versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus King Kong. I assume it's Godzilla versus King Kong. I'd push that back a whole extra year, at least. And I'm not sure about this whole. I think I'm not convinced Godzilla vs. King Kong is coming out. There's some weird rights issues that nobody's talking about that I feel like have to come into play at some point. So as far as I know, Legendary has the rights for 3 Godzilla films. Now obviously that contract can be extended, but at least when the first film came out, they said they had the rights to do a trilogy, which is what TriStar had back in the 90s. That first Godzilla film that was awful and nobody liked, that they had the rights to make 3 Godzilla films. It was going to be, a trilogy. If these films do really well, I assume that there could be an extension or a new contract or something like that. I'm not saying there could only be 3 Godzilla films, but I'm interested to know if Godzilla vs. King Kong counts as that 3rd Godzilla film. Because if it does, you're really blowing that whole thing with putting out Godzilla 2 in, 2019 and then Godzilla vs. King Kong in 2020. If that is supposed to be the conclusion of the Godzilla trilogy, I don't know. That just seems weird. So I don't know if this is like when Robert Downey Jr. renegotiated his contract and he was like, well, I'll appear in this many films. I think it was after Iron Man 2? Yeah, it was after Iron Man 2, where he signed on to do another Iron Man film, and I think 2 Avengers films was the deal at that point. I don't know if it's a thing like that, where, like, this does not count as that third Godzilla film. This counts as, like, a separate thing. Also, I'm kind of surprised that that Toei's going to let them do this. Because Toei's been trying to make a Godzilla vs. King Kong film. Well, I mean, not actively trying to make a Godzilla vs. King Kong film, because they haven't done anything since Final Wars, but I can think of at least twice offhand that I'm aware of that they tried to make a remake of Godzilla vs. King Kong, and they were shot down because of rights issues. I guess King Kong's in the public domain now, so if anyone wants to go publish a King Kong book or video game or something, I'm sure you can do that now. From my understanding, King Kong is now in the public domain, which is how we're getting Skull Island and Godzilla vs. King Kong, and they're not in the same universe. So I think that's all. It's all weird. There's all this contractual stuff that, you know, they're not telling us because we don't need to know. But personally, knowing a little bit about that and knowing that Toei's spiteful, I wouldn't be surprised if we did not get Godzilla vs. King Kong, King Kong vs. Godzilla. The original's called King Kong vs. Godzilla. I think this one's called Godzilla vs. King Kong, and my brain keeps wanting to flip them, regardless of which one I say first. But so, yeah. I mean, we made a bad Godzilla movie, and they responded by making a Godzilla movie to show us up. We made a good Godzilla movie, and they responded by making a Godzilla movie to show us up. We've denied them the ability to make a Godzilla vs. King Kong movie. I feel like if we try and make a Godzilla vs. King Kong movie, they're going to say something about that. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just saying, King Kong vs. Godzilla, I wouldn't get your hopes up. I'm saying we're going to... I don't know. I don't think that's locked down. I know it's locked down on the calendar, but I'm just saying. The other big thing is that Gareth Edwards is not coming back for Godzilla 2. We don't really have any details on why, except for after Star Wars Rogue One, he wants to work on smaller, more personal projects. He has a couple of them lined up. And to my understanding, the reason Godzilla 2 was coming out so late to begin with was to accommodate his schedule, because he was doing the Star Wars movie. I don't want... The film industry is in a very strange place right now, where you used to, like, build your way up through films. You know, you'd make a small film, you make a little bit bigger film, you make a little bit bigger film, and you keep proving themselves, and they keep giving you more and more money. Or you were John Carpenter, and you just put out a brilliant film, like, every year, and nobody went and saw it. But for some reason, they kind of kept giving you the same amount of money, and then they slowly started taking it away. With the current Hollywood system, it is you make a small movie that people like and is well received, and then we give you all of the money. And we give you a huge franchise, something that probably has to make money. So, I mean, this happened with the guy that did, I think it was Safety Not Guaranteed. I think the Safety Not Guaranteed guy did Jurassic World, and now he's doing Star Wars 3. Like, that is a huge, like, leap. And so I think it's nice to see that Gareth Edwards is either, for entirely artistic reasons, choosing to not just do big films, or maybe he's burnt out. Like, Joss Whedon chose not to come back for Avengers 3. He was burnt out after doing 2 big studio blockbuster films. Gareth Edwards did 2 big studio blockbuster films. Maybe he is burnt out. Maybe, or maybe because they already moved back Godzilla to fit his schedule, he would have to do Godzilla 2 immediately after doing Star Wars. And therefore, he does have other projects he wants to do. So they're changing the director, and this is why I actually waited a couple of days to do this video, is I wanted to see if another director was quickly announced. When Edgar Wright left Ant-Man, it was pretty quick that we got a new director. I'm gonna guess the news of the release date being pushed back preceded the news of the of Gareth Edwards leaving. I'm gonna guess that it's getting pushed back because Gareth Edwards left. If anything, I feel like that would fast track it, because they don't have to keep waiting for him. They could start shooting tomorrow. At least getting the script ready. I don't know. Oh, they should have been getting the script ready this whole time. They should have a script ready right now. It's been 2 years, man. There better be a Monster Island script, like fourth draft. You know, almost ready. They should be able to start shooting by the end of the year. They should just be waiting for Gareth Edwards. And now that he's not coming, they could start shooting tomorrow. I don't know. But I don't think this is a great loss. I don't want to say Gareth Edwards was wrong for Godzilla. I think he made certain choices that I don't agree with. The big one being the never showing the monsters fighting until the end, and then not giving us enough of that fight. That's a very artistic decision. I think that's a sign of somebody who's not just a work-for-hire director. You know, there's nothing in Jurassic World that feels particularly creative or inventive. It's not a knock against that movie. I liked that movie, but I think with Gareth Edwards, there's very clearly a little bit more going on. It's a little bit better directed than something like Jurassic World. So he definitely left his mark on that movie, but I'm not sure his mark was what I wanted on that movie, so it's not a grave loss. At least I don't think so. People really liked that movie. Non-Godzilla people really liked that movie. I mean, Godzilla people did too, but, I mean, Godzilla people don't... You know, they make the joke about... you know, the reason that they change things for comic book films for mainstream audiences is, you know, if they got all of the comic book fans together, they would fill, you know, a baseball stadium. Yeah, Godzilla fans wouldn't fill a baseball stadium. I don't think. The people that really like Godzilla and, like, are going to go see a Godzilla movie in theaters regardless, I don't think they... That's even more niche than comic books. And so... I think Gareth Edwards did a pretty good job of making a movie that normal people will like. So whoever they get, I'm worried that whoever they get is going to be someone that has never done anything of worth ever before. Like that was a thing when they got the guy for Doctor Strange. It was like I looked at his filmography and I was like, oh well, I don't really know any of these movies, and the ones I do know are like crappy horror movies. So I'm not really excited, but directing's easier than ever now because so much of it's special effects. So I kind of hope that they replace Gareth Edwards with someone that also has a vision of some kind. It doesn't have to be the same vision that Gareth Edwards has, but someone who's not just a work-for-hire director. And while Gareth Edwards was a work-for-hire director, I think he was a little bit better than most of the people we put on movies like this. I know we're not going to get a visionary. I know we're not... Well, I mean, I guess we could get Del Toro. He's off Pacific Rim. Maybe he got off Pacific Rim because he's getting to do a Godzilla movie. I don't know. But, I'm not going to make... I mean, this video is already 23 minutes. I don't know what more I could say if more news comes out, unless it's something big. But, if you don't see me make a video about when they announce the director, that either means... I don't have an opinion or I don't know the director, which more than likely is the same thing. You know, the thing about movies like this is it's really hard to point to... there are very few filmmakers that you can point to who are like, well, yeah, clearly he can do Godzilla because he did X. You know, it's not that simple. We don't make a lot of kaiju movies. But I think it's interesting that the director's left. No word on the writer. If you followed the production of Godzilla 2014, it was one of those movies that a bunch of writers went through, and then when you went and saw the movie, there was only one writer listed. Those are weird. Um, but yeah, if you were following the production of the 2014 Godzilla, there were a lot of writers. It seems like the core script was Max Bornstein, I think was his name, and then they just kept bringing on people to kind of touch up the script, or they brought in a bunch of people and then Max Bornstein kind of touched up all of their scripts and kind of brought it into a cohesive whole, and then they had a couple other writers come on to touch up that script. It's one of those processes where, like, we know Frank Darabont worked in this movie, and if you've seen the film, it's really clear which scenes Frank Darabont worked on. Hint, it's the ones that you cared about, like the emotional scenes. Those were Frank Darabont. Everyone, like, I think David Goyer was on this script at one point. Like, this was just one of those movies that had a lot of people working on that. You know, if you're following it, it looked like there was like 17 different writers on this movie, which is how a lot of films do, in fact, get made. I don't know if people realize that when we're talking about like studio films, but a lot of movies have a lot of writers, and a lot of times, you know, it's something like Godzilla where like the finished film comes out and it only has one writer listed, and like they assured us that he's coming back for the next film, but that doesn't mean anything because we don't know how much of his script is actually on the screen. We just know that he's the guy listed, which I believe by WGA rules means that, like, all of the scenes from his script are in the film. There's a whole thing with, like, crediting, and, like, the Writers Guild of America cares less about, like, if you tweak a scene or, like, alter some dialogue than they do if you actually add a scene. So what we could be looking at, so the finished film could be Max Bornstein's script with a bunch of the scenes rewritten by other writers, which wouldn't actually be enough contribution to the script for those other writers to get credited on the film. WGA rules are weird, which is why way back when The Incredible Hulk, that Ed Norton doesn't get credited as the writer, even though if you followed the lead up to that film, it sounded like he completely rewrote that script. And from what I understand, he did completely rewrite that script, but with the script he had. Like, he just kind of rewrote scenes, but because they weren't new scenes, it didn't actually count towards getting him a credit in the film. WGA rules are weird. But, so, I'm not sure if he's still attached. I haven't heard anything about him. I haven't heard him on other projects. I don't know. But at least Gareth Edwards is gone. Outside of Guillermo del Toro, I don't really have a pick for the next one. I'd love to see what Guillermo del Toro visually would do with Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan. But yeah, this is probably the longest log that anyone's ever made on really little news. Sorry.